Oh, folks, I think we got pretty close that time. We're always rolling the dice here at the Rec Poker Podcast because we do these babies live on YouTube every Monday night at 7:30 Eastern. So thanks for joining us here. If you're in the YouTube chat, thanks for joining us live. You're going to get a chance to win some prizes later tonight. I see we've got some friendly faces and names already typing away in there. That's fantastic. If you're not joining us live on YouTube, then I hope you're enjoying your commute, or you're taking a nice nature walk, or you're painting the house, or you're walking your dog, or something fun while you listen to the Rec Poker Podcast. We have so much fun over here. I love doing this podcast. My name's Jim Reed. I'm Blusterini in the home game and at Rec Poker Jim on Twitter. I have to shout out our sponsors because most of what we do here at Rec Poker is free. We're a largely volunteer based organization. And so the support of the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino makes a huge difference to what we do here. We wouldn't be here without them. And we wouldn't be here without our premium members as well. Every once in a while, I missed the show last week, so we've got a couple of weeks of new premium members to welcome. So Kathleen Toomey, Brian Eck, Chris Del Muro, and Michelle Maybaum. Can't wait to get to know these new Rec Poker Premium members better. I had a chance to hang out with Chris in our study group on Saturday. He's got a bright poker future ahead of him. I can't wait to get to know him a little better. Brian Eck was one of the winners of Angela Jordison and Jackie Burkhart's veterans packages that we were a part of. So I'm excited to get to know Brian better. Kathleen Twomey, I believe, is a Plawn member, a Poker League of Nations member, who got a seat through her involvement with Denise Denise Aces, as some of our friends might know her as. So Kathleen, welcome. And Michelle Maybaum just joined the other day, and I haven't had a chance to even reach out to say hello to her yet. But every time we get a new premium member, it puts a smile on my face. I send out that email. We get a little one-to-one Zoom session. I get to walk them through the website and tell them about all the great features that they're going to be enjoying as a premium member. So I can't wait to talk to these new premium members sometime soon. So the sponsors, boy, we couldn't do it without them. The premium members, I mean, that's why we get out of bed every morning. But the real magic makers over here are the other members of the Wrecking Crew. Get used to hearing my voice on Monday nights because I host the show, but it is a village, it's a gang, it's a crew of people that make everything happen over here. We are the Wrecking Crew. If you want to find out more about me or the other members of the Wrecking Crew, you can go to rec.poker/crew, or you can just listen up because you're going to meet a few of them right here tonight on the air.
My name is Joe Coolis. You can find me at Joe Cool PhD, cool with a K, or Elvita11 in the home game.
And I am John Somsky. I am Poker Geek MN everywhere.
I'm Kim Kilroy. I am Fergie56 in the home game. I am PetVet_33 on Twitter.
And I'm Rob Washam, and I'm Rabman50 just about everywhere.
And I want to shout out a couple folks in the chat. I'm getting some positive encouragement from Martha Reed. Yeah, that is my mom, Martha, in the YouTube chat. She barely ever misses a show. She's here almost every week. I love having my mom in the YouTube chat as we do this show every week. So thanks for the positive encouragement, Mom. We're all doing our best over here. And we've got a couple first-timers here. Looks like Anne-Marie Finley. I'm excited. That name sounds familiar. I feel like I know Anne-Marie Finley, but maybe we'll find out in the chat what her involvement is with Rec Poker and how she got into the YouTube chat tonight. So we're going to give away some prizes tonight like we always do. Unfortunately, David K. Lappin, who's going to be the guest tonight, emailed me and said he's actually playing live right now. He's going deep in something and has to postpone the interview until tomorrow morning. So I apologize to the YouTube chat folks that are here live to watch the show. Do me a favor, if you have any questions for David, just type them in the chat. We're going to do the rest of the show here now. We'll talk about some home game results, some upcoming events. What else are we doing here? We'll do our prize draw. Someone's going to win a free month at an amazing poker training site. Maybe ours, maybe someone else's. The world's big enough for many. And we'll do all of that at the end of the show. But so there is some time. If you've got questions for David K. Lappin, the one and only, type them in the YouTube chat here, and I will make sure to ask them of him in the interview tomorrow morning. So let me see. Before we get into the interview, I just want to shout out Roger Schutte and Renz. These guys help us out with a lot of our post-production stuff. and they make the podcast happen so seamlessly. We really couldn't do what we do without them. And so this is your cue, Roger and Renz. We're going to throw to an interview that hasn't happened yet. And then, like magic, we'll come right back to the show here immediately afterward. Okay, let's see how it works. All right. Well, folks, we got him back in the chair. I'm excited to be welcoming David K Lappin back to the Rec Poker Podcast. David's a poker personality. He's been a player. He's an ambassador. He's a writer. He's a podcast host. He's a commentator. There's a lot that he does, and we're going to talk to him about kind of what that is like as an individual inside the poker industry. So first of all, David, I just want to say thanks for making some time for us from all the way halfway across the world and coming back on the Rec Poker Podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me, and thank you for getting up early. I know with the time difference, you were the one who made the sacrifice. You left out espresso connoisseur. I just want to say you could have added that.
That's right, espresso connoisseur. That's well put. And I think you and I also share a taste for fine tequila. So there's just a lot of wonderful experiences out there for the poker player. We don't have to limit it to hot beverages. Even there's a lot to work on there.
If you caught me about 6 hours later, then definitely we would have been slamming margaritas by now.
Yeah. So it's a little early for folks that are listening in. We couldn't get David at the typical recording time because he was crushing a live poker game at the time. So we're getting together the next morning. For me, I've got the espresso going here. So David, one of the questions that I usually like to lead off with our guests is to kind of place themselves within the context of the poker world. I think that's going to be a little challenging for you because of all the different roles that you have. But if you were in the elevator and someone asked you, oh, what do you do in the poker world? How would you kind of sum it up for them these days right now?
Yeah, I think jack of all trades, master of none is probably a phrase that's coming to mind right now. Can I also say that I love the way you referred to me crushing a live poker tournament was me coming 18th in a live poker tournament. Not so much crushing that one, really, just sort of, hanging on grimly and getting some ladders. But yeah, look, I suppose I was the best playing version of myself 7 or 8 years ago. Like, obviously you always improve, so I'm probably the best player I ever was today, but relative to the pool, I think I'm probably slowly on the decline. Occasionally every year or two I sort of realize the decline has got too bad, and I pump myself up, and I do some study, and I hit the DTO, and I talk more hands with Dara, and that normally gets me sharp again. And this is certainly the time of year I want to do that because World Series on the horizon. But you're right, I'm very split these days. Consciously so. Like, I love the role of being an ambassador for Unibet. I've been doing that for 7 years now, and that's really important to me in terms of, what place it gives you sort of status-wise in the industry to affect some change. Maybe it's only on a relatively small scale with just the Unibet customers. We're a small enough piece of the overall pie, but we've a lot of recreational players, which obviously, speaking to you guys, I know will be speaking to your hearts as well, and just trying to figure out the way to best create poker experience for them, be it live or online. And and then of course that role has led to the podcast, which is very much my baby, Darren, our baby, which we put an awful lot of work and time into still. And I think if it ever reaches the point where we don't want to put as much work or effort in, I think it'll be obvious, and we'll probably try and wind it down. But we've remained enthusiastic across these 7 or 8 years, and I don't see that flagging at all. And then more recently, maybe in the last few years, doing more writing, which definitely scratches another creative itch of mine, and places me in that role of both in an industry and observer of an industry at the same time, which is a little unusual. But yeah, look, I love it. Like, at different points in my career, I've staked players. I've been, as I mentioned, an ambassador. With that has come some commentary work. I commentate for Merit Poker these days alongside Ali Najad and James Dempsey, which is great fun as well. Darrell Carney joined us for one of those weekends too, or kind of like, they're more like 1 week long junkets. I hope he'll be doing more of it with me as well. He's obviously great to be in the commentary booth with such a wealth of knowledge. So yeah, just being able to have all those different strings to my bow is great, and it keeps it diverse and it keeps an industry interesting that could, I think for me anyway, get a little bit dry if I was just grinding sit and goes like you mentioned. I did at the beginning of my career. I think, not to say I've fallen out of love with the game at different points, but my excitement for playing the game, certainly as a grinder, has waned. It's sort of ebbed and flowed down the years.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's something that I want to talk about a little, because a lot of people love poker. They get into poker as players. And like yourself, they can have a lot of success playing the game, but they, in order to really be successful in poker, not as a player, but in life, I feel like you need to kind of have your fingers in a lot of different pies. Like as a poker professional, unless you're absolutely crushing it on the felt, to make a living in the industry, it seems like you have to kind of diversify and have several spokes off the hub like that in the way that you're doing. So one of the things I want to talk to you about was kind of the journey from being a very successful player. And it was mostly an online sit and goes. I know that you kind of made your name back in the day. Was the next step from there the ambassadorship with Unibet? Was that kind of the first thing outside of playing that got you into this place in the industry?
I guess it went sit and goes into MTTs. There was kind of a heyday of sit and goes for me, playing 45-man and 90-man tournaments, which was sort of a bankroll builder in the first few years, I will say. Gravitated into tournaments, got very good at satellites. Obviously, Darrell and I overlap a huge amount there. I certainly picked up an awful lot from him down the years in that format too. And then, yeah, just MTTs in general. And then I suppose as time went by, probably a different ratio, a bigger ratio of live to online, where it used to go the other way around profoundly. And then, yeah, then it was another few years before the ambassadoring. I remember we chased some leaderboards on the UK IPT back in 2011, 2012, myself, Dara, our other great pal, Dara Davey, and Jason Tompkins, who we were the four stakers of a lot of Irish players together. And there was a sort of carrot at the time Stars had put out that, maybe, just maybe, we'd get a sponsorship deal as a collective. And we chased that hard. Dara won the online leaderboard every year. I think I came third one year and fourth the next year in that. And then Dara Davey won the live leaderboard back-to-back years. And again, I think I came maybe third and fifth in that. So I was like in the runner-up spots on both fronts. And then I think Darrell Carney was like fourth in the live one as well. So we were really crushing it for a while. And a couple of our horses did really well too. One of them won a UK IPT in Dublin and then final tabled an EPT in London, which was sort of all part of the same circuit. So we, for a while, thought we were, I don't want to say quids in with Stars, but we did think that was maybe something we were chasing a little bit then, but it never reified. It never became a thing. And then, of course, Stars sort of went bad under Amaya. And and we became very critical of them, which I think in a way led to our deal with Unibet. It was kind of an interesting moment in time where, when we were very loyal to Stars because they were great in 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012 even, you wanted to put your volume there because, the loyalty program was good, you're treated well. And then as soon as you weren't, I guess that's one of the things about poker players. We're very smart customers. Like a lot of customers in other industries are not smart and they won't vote with their feet. We did vote with our feet, and Stars have obviously been on a decline since. And I think are making a genuine comeback in the last couple of years. But maybe the damage is done there. Amaya really did rip apart what was great about that company, and damn it, they had an almost monopoly situation in that sense. But what happened was Dara and I, in particular, within our group, became vocal about the changes that were bad. And those blogs, I think they were mostly kind of manifested in blogs and tweets, sort of galvanized the community around that viewpoint. And I guess we became somewhat emblematic of that anti-Stars sentiment, which then ironically made us very appealing two rivals of Stars as being, vocal spokespeople, ambassadors. And we found ourselves being courted by a number of other sites, and we probably could have chosen one of 3 sites to go to, but in the end, not for financial reasons, because I think Unibet was like bang in the middle of what we were being offered financially to sign on the dotted line. But Unibet just spoke to us in terms of, their player ethos. They had a fantastic head of poker. Then David Pomeroy, have a great head of poker now, and Chris Burkfall, but just had an ethos of wanting to give to the community, wanting to have, recreational friendly environment. No hoods on the site was important. Effectively a sort of anonymous site if you want it to be, because you can change your alias whenever you want. And yeah, just the Unibet Opens in particular, I think the live wing of the company just really looked after people tremendously well, gave a great player experience when people went to live events. I know we're about to do a big announcement for our big Unibet Open this year, so watch that space. But, again, anyone who goes to that, I think you win a 2K package, but they're like worth about $2,500 in extra value because of all the extra parties and things that we always put on. So when you see a company doing that, it becomes very attractive, because for Darrell and I, as people who are maybe not your kind of like old school patched up pros, we're the vocal people who are making content all the time and giving our opinions all the time. You're in a very vulnerable position if your company suddenly changes their mind about how they're going to do business and start doing things that aren't very player friendly. And then you're the guys who are supposed to be defending those viewpoints, and you can't really do it with any conviction anymore, because it's not the case. We've never been put in that spot by Unibet, who've always maintained those values. So that's the reason, they spoke to us, and ultimately it's been a very successful partnership now for coming up to 7 years.
That's great. So I want to dig into kind of some of the logistics and mechanics of that role and some of the other ways that you're involved with other organizations. So for recreational poker players like us, we kind of see this notion of getting sponsored as kind of like one of those summits that you can hit as a player. And I think for different companies and different organizations, the arrangements are different, that kind of thing. Not talking about Unibet specifically, but what are some typical kind of obligations or requirements that go into that arrangement for you as a player? Is it that you're, because that you get paid X amount of dollars every month or year? And well, actually, let me ask about that. Are there other compensation aspects to it beyond an actual like compensation monetary exchange?
No, like there's a paycheck, and there's live buy-ins, and there's sort of, there's different ways in which the compensation is met. I guess, a combination of money and buy-ins to tournaments pretty much covers it all. This is sort of going into the weeds of it, but the chip race is a separate entity. We've always owned the chip race, Darrell and I. So even though Unibet have been the sponsor of it since season 2, all the way up to season 20 now, so basically pretty much always been its sponsor, we still own it. So there's a slight sort of funny thing contractually where the chip race is its own separate contract, if you like, its own separate entity. But I'm kind of conscious I'm getting into the weeds of it there. Essentially, to answer your question, it is a financial relationship for sure.
And then what is typically like asked of you or other pros that have been patched in that way? Is it to play at certain events? Is it to only say nice things about the organization in public? Is it to, write so many articles about something? Like what are kind of the obligations that are placed on you in the other part of that exchange?
Playing on the site is a big part of it too. Darrell and I mentioned that, you can be anonymous, and you can, and that's a great feature. But Darrell and I have our own specific avatar. So when we play, you're playing against us, and we put on decent volume on the site. We host a bit like every other site. We host special championship, special week-long, 2-week-long festivals. We participate fully in those, chase the leaderboards in those for the fun of it too. And when we play live, we obviously go to all the live events. We also go to a lot of the partnered live events. Unibet, post-COVID lockdowns, have gone for a model of where we're having fewer Unibet Opens, but we are partnering with like the IPO in Dublin, the Malta Poker Festival. We've always had via our French side of the company, the Unibet DSOs, which are France, but also more than just France, tour as well, run by Alex Henry. It's a fantastic tour. More recently, we've partnered with the festivals. That's Frankie von Seiberg. We just had one of those here in Malta last week. So trying to attend as many of those as is possible. There's some consultancy internally in the company. Again, we overhauled our schedule, our sort of nightly and weekend schedule about 6 months ago. And while all the credit should go to Andy Payton within the company for that, we definitely advised and we definitely, helped a bit in terms of how that would be shaped. Going back historically, I was quite involved in the branding of how the site would look in terms of, space theme, space design, which was one of our earlier things, and, branding tournaments, naming tournaments. I also kind of act as a bit of a liaison with the media, I suppose. I'm obviously sort of within the media in terms of having a writing gig, but I do a lot of the liaising with our affiliates and other kind of companies who write about poker, trying to provide them with accurate content for what we do. I think the chip race is a big part of it. Chip race puts us out pretty much once a week with content, whether it's a strategy video, the classic sort of chip race 5-act structure episode, or the lock-ins, which are a more topical show that go on YouTube and then later onto our audio platforms. There's a lot of work goes into those, to be honest. So that's a big lump of it, to be honest, is the chip race involvement. And then there's it's a sort of a multifaceted job, I guess. I think while I wouldn't be hard on a person or a player who's greener and would think, oh, well, it's just, you become great at poker, you win a big tournament and you get patched up by a site. And don't get me wrong, that still kind of happens a little bit. And it used to be the main model for how people became sponsored pros back in the day. It's much more a content creation model these days. Virtually no company want an ambassador to just wear a patch. They want to get some bang for their buck. They want to see that in some sort of tangible way. Maybe they have to justify it to their boss within the big company, that value can be established. So that's much more what it's like. Obviously, some people Twitch, podcast is pretty much our way of doing things.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, I do remember back in the heyday, it was almost that simple. Go bink a big tournament and just go send your hat around to different companies and see who was going to sponsor you up. And you definitely see a switch towards a more of a content creation element of it, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, I understand why that is the case. So you bring up sort of your place within the poker industry, but you're also kind of observing the poker industry, sharing your thoughts on the poker industry. You're someone who doesn't pull any punches. I think, people respect that they're going to hear what you feel when you come to write or to talk about something. Can you talk a little bit about there must be some tension between both being a big part of the poker industry as a player and having a network of friends and colleagues there, but also wanting to be impartial and objective in how you describe things going on in the poker industry that you think people could be doing better, or other kind of constructive criticism. I guess talk a little bit about that tension professionally, and I'm also kind of curious about it personally.
Honestly, the tension can dissolve somewhat if you just focus on being an ambassador for poker. Obviously, I'm an ambassador for Unibet Poker, and that's, paying me a wage. But I do even say it to my boss in Unibet. I say, look, I don't consider myself a Unibet ambassador first. I consider myself a poker ambassador first. And I think what that means is your loyalty is to the players. Your loyalty is to the customers and the people who either travel live for poker or, log on and throw $100 onto their online account so that they can grind some games. Giving them the best experience and looking out for them is my sort of North Star, my first priority. And I think if that always is the case, and I think if your attitude is about, well, what's right for them in terms of what game selection they should have, what's right for them in terms of what environment is created that's not too predatory, what's right for them in terms of like when they go to a live event, will they be really well looked after, and will they sort of have an experience like they felt like it was a holiday as much as it was a poker, buy-in and hotel combination? Will they feel like they sort of got a vacation out of it, which is important too, because again, we're trying to sell experience to people. We're trying to compete with the cinema industry, the gaming industry, video games or whatever. So I think once you realize that that's your focus, then you can sort of like your morality can emerge from that. And therefore, sure, there are times where I'm critical of other sites. I've been critical of individuals. I've certainly been critical of the way people have gone about being maybe too greedy in poker and, not giving players enough back. I suppose that would be quite a common theme. I suppose I feel like, well, as long as I'm always prioritizing the player experience, I can just justify it that way. If someone goes, hey, you're being a bit harsh, and hey, I thought we were friends, why you ragging on this thing? We were a guest on your show and we had a nice interview, and now you're criticizing something I'm doing. It's just like, well, we're never loyal to you, we're loyal to those people. So if you do things that are good, then probably it will end up being positive coverage. And if you're not, it won't, if that makes sense.
I like that. I think that's a great way of looking at it. And I think, I think when you kind of, it's a meritocracy approach to people's reputations, right? I think that's exactly the way it should be. So I've got a couple more questions here. I know Joe's got a couple as well. What are a couple things that have, and positive or negative, as you've gotten more involved in the poker industry, what are one or two things that kind of surprised you that you weren't expecting as you learn more about the industry itself? Well, like I say, whether a good thing or a bad thing, things that you didn't expect to learn or things that you didn't see coming. Talk to me about one or two kind of surprises that you've experienced over the last few years.
I didn't see the move into the black market and the gray market coming in the way that it did. I guess you can trace it all the way back to the UIGEA, which is a disastrous law, and it still sort of affects the the Wire Act and whatever in America. The fact that Americans can't legally log on and make transfers with these kinds of sites. The objective of that, this probably wasn't even the real objective of that, but if you were to be generous to the people who wanted to install something like that, it was to protect people. It was to be maybe at the risk of being a nanny state. It was to, help problem gamblers. It was to, I'm finding it hard to even make this argument because I don't know if that's even really what it was about. But even if that was what it was about, then the effect of it is it's just driven it underground. It's like prohibition. It's just driven it all underground. And now we have a situation where more than half the industry is on these dodgy apps, these gray market sites, and I would include GG in this. ACR obviously operating in a sort of quasi-crypto space. Not to say that there aren't good people even in those companies trying to do more right things than wrong, but essentially they're not operating within jurisdictions and regulations properly. And certainly the apps even more so when you are just like allowing a system where it's not just a pyramid scheme, but it's like the facility to build loads of pyramid schemes so that customers can get fucked at the end of the day. It's terrible. So by penalizing the sites that were would offer a clean game and regulate and are open to being taxed at the right amounts and blah blah blah, not allowing that has driven the game underground because there's a demand for the game. People love poker that much that they'll still try and find their poker where they can. And if that becomes the internet version of an underground game in New York, they'll find it. And they won't be protected, and their deposit won't be protected, and they're very vulnerable to predatory practices, both by players in the game who could be colluding against them, and no one's going to really check into that, or whether their money is even really safe, or is even their money once they hand it over anymore. That's a huge problem, and I didn't see it becoming like that in the way that it has over the last decade. And I think that's the huge existential problem we have in poker right now, which is that we've actually driven the game into a black marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think earlier you mentioned poker players being sort of smart customers. And I almost wanted to check you there because, well, they're definitely opportunists. I'm not sure they're actually that smart, much smarter than the general population, but we kind of, as you say, we kind of created this incentive for players. Like, I think the prohibition's a really excellent allegory for it here, because that's you can see it playing out in exactly that way. And people are going to go get what they want. And if you don't do it in a way that's safe and regulated and taxed, then you're going to end up doing it in, these back rooms and unregulated markets. So I share your concern for that. I don't think it does the game a service either to have so many of our players playing in these gray and black market areas. Poker already has an image problem, and like the last thing we need to do is make it less reputable by any measure.
No, it's a great point, and you're right to push back on my use of the word smart. I think a better phrase would be, we're like short-term sharp.
Yes.
We'll do the quick maths and work out this isn't good anymore, the rake is too high, and we'll vote with our feet and go somewhere else. But we won't necessarily look at the long term and go, oh, well, if we now go to another place where it's being offered at a better rate, but we don't know our money's safe there and it's not, maybe a regulated site or whatever, then that's obviously not a smart decision, but it's kind of like a sharp decision at some level.
Yeah. Joe?
I was just going to kind of comment on that I think that beyond making it, people worried in the gray market sites, it also starts to select for a particular individual who's a little bit more comfortable with risk and maybe not quite as concerned about rules and things. So to your point, David, I think it starts to further complicate things because you have more worse actors as a percentage. I'm not saying all poker players are bad who play on those sites, because allegedly I might play on those sites. I just can't say for certain, being where I live. But you end up being much, much more concerned that there's a greater percentage of bad actors who would be more willing to say, well, I don't care about this person. I don't care about collusion. It's not technically illegal, or it's illegal, but I don't care. And that drives a lot of people away from the game because to your point, they just don't feel safe, and they have a reason not to feel safe on those sites. Yeah. I personally, if I were allegedly ever to put any money on such a site, it's gone. I've already spent that money. I don't consider myself ever getting it off the site. And it changes what I play, the stakes that I play, because I'm just not going to invest sufficient money in there, which hurts the poker economy significantly, because I'm the kind of customer that people want, is somebody who has a job and has disposable income and is bad at poker. And so that's exactly the guy. I mean, I can't imagine a better person to have at your table. And I only dip my foot in the pool because I'm very concerned about that the money that I want for other things will be gone.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think you're right, Joe. You're not very good at poker, and I'd love to have you at my table anytime. No, but seriously, I think that matters, right? I mean, I think if we think about this globally and how we want to make the poker world, a bigger place and have more people feeling comfortable in it. David, when I was on your show, we talked about the importance of ostracizing assholes. I think the poker world, there's no fewer jerks in the poker world per capita than any other part of humankind, maybe even more. So I think it does behoove us as individuals who have a bit of a platform to kind of provide that positive example and to point out some of the hypocrisy or the shortcomings of these other aspects of the industry. Do you feel like a responsibility to do that because you've been, given this microphone and this platform?
Absolutely. No, that's one of the main responsibilities, I think. Not just in the way that you can do it by consulting with the people in the back room at the particular company you work for, but as a role model of sorts when you go out into the world. Now, I know people might laugh if they remember me when I was a 20-something poker player, because I was a little rough around the edges and still very opinionated, but lippier would probably be a very fair description. Darrell Carney would often tell stories of when we first met and how I think he feels responsible for applying the sandpaper. But yeah, I think that's a huge responsibility. Obviously, professional players always get late. You're supposed to be there, both almost like helping people to have a good time, but also like you just generally making it a nice experience for recreational, certainly never giving out when you run bad. And, for the most part, I don't do that. Like, I think being at a table with me is hopefully a nice experience. But I do feel a huge amount of just general responsibility for creating a safe space, a healthy space. It's sort of ecosystem is a kind of a bandied around phrase in poker, and I'm not sure it's exactly the right word, but maybe the best word in this context is that to try and create a healthy ecosystem, which I fundamentally believe is a site not taking too much money out of it. Unibet, and again, I know it's going to sound like an ad for Unibet, but I do a mini ad for Unibet to make a point here, which is that like our rake on cash games is the lowest in the industry. Our rake on tournaments is equal or lowest in the industry. The reason for that is we value keeping the money in circulation because it helps keep the games going. It gives people, again, player experience being the key phrase here. If you're a losing player, but you lose it slower, you get more value for your money. So if we're competing with the film industry and you're going to go to the movies once a week and buy your popcorn and, maybe go for a coffee and talk about the film with your friend, you've spent $30 or whatever. Well, maybe we can, give you an equally or even better experience for your $30 as a losing player. Now, maybe you're break even, maybe even win money at the game. And that's great for you then. That you'll all be helped by the site taking less money too. So that's really important. When you look at the flip side of that and sites that are, applying egregious rake, and again, I'm going to go after GG on this, like their cash games are obscene with the rake they pay, the highest rate basically in the industry across the board in most departments. Now, I know their features are great and I know they have loads of positives to their site, don't get me wrong. The site is cleverly made and, their marketing is a bit cowboyish, but it's very effective. So there's a lot to be, said positively for them. But I hate the idea of the site taking too much and that level of greed. And that's kind of what started that, like, in a sense, that comes back to the point about stars and the EMI era from a few years back, is that what basically, when you boil it down, what happened was they got greedier. They sold their company.
Yes.
They bought the company from the Scheinbergs for 4 point whatever billion. They had to pay that 4 billion back to the banks, and they decided, well, we can gouge the players for the next few years to do that. And so we ended up paying the bill for what ended up in, Mark and his Scheinberg's pocket for them to go off and on their other adventures. But when they were in charge of the company, they ran it like a family business. They'd already made their money, huge amounts of money from it. So they didn't see the same priority as in gouging the players. But as soon as it was a new company, they did have that priority. And that's, led to their, I wouldn't say downfall. They're still a huge player in the industry, but they certainly diminished enormously over those years and made room for the other sites to kind of grow up around them and compete. But I do feel as though maybe the best way you can do that is to create an ecosystem where the site is less greedy and encourage that as best you can.
Yeah, we talk here at Rec Poker quite a bit about recreational players. Some recreational players are winning players, some are quite accomplished players. A lot of recreational players have a budget. It's not a bankroll. I think of it like a hobby, like you say, going to the movies. You go to the movies with a friend, you get coffee or you get popcorn and a drink or something. Like you say, there's $30 gone. No one ever went to the movies and hit a big score at the movies. So like there's this whole, like, I think having a budget for it is just like you would any other hobby, golf, sailing. Boy, we're really outing ourselves as rich, white, privileged people here, aren't we? Yeah, maybe horseback riding, something that the poors do. But it just strikes me that I think that is a savvy way to think about the poker market, is people with entertainment budgets who don't mind spending a few bucks to have a good time, just like they would with any of their other hobbies. It's just that you also have the chance to become a break-even player, to be a winning player, to even not be a very good player, but get lucky and, end up doing well in a tournament or in a cash game or something like that. I think that's, and I think we kind of do see the poker world pivoting a little bit from really going after this sense of, hey, come join our site and we'll chew you up and spit you out and turn you into a pro and a shark on the felt and you'll make $1 million as a pro poker player, to more of this, come enjoy the game of poker with us. Like that's what we've been doing here for many years. But I think if poker is going to grow, it has to start focusing on the recreational players, the players that want to just come and have a good time, and not necessarily the players that are going to try and become professionals or like take it to that level. Is that something that you're also seeing in the industry?
Yeah, and to pick up on something you said there, I think there's another aspect of it too, which is that if a poker player, whether they're terrible, mediocre, good, or excellent, there's an amount of authorship they feel over a poker win. If they have a result, they remember the time they outplayed the other guy, or they reshoved the hand, or they bluffed the spot, and therefore they feel very responsible and deserving, maybe more so, of their win than someone playing bingo or someone, just guessing numbers on a roulette wheel. So I think even though maybe you could take a macro view and say, "I'll actually, when you combine all the variants that can be in it, really the bad players will have to get lucky, the mediocre players will have to get somewhat lucky, and then it maybe still all goes to the winning players fundamentally or ultimately." I think in terms of the experience for people, you do feel an authorship over your result. If you do win a poker tournament, you feel like, yes, of course you won some coin flips along the way, blah, 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 but you do feel like you made loads of decisions which led to that. And decisions make you feel in control. And if you feel in control of what happened, you feel more deserving of the outcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that does make sense. Joe?
Well, I've talked to a lot of roulette players. They seem to have a lot of feel that they have a lot of decisional capacity.
A lot of system.
Yeah, right, exactly. Joe, did you have another one there?
Not a follow-up if you want. I have my questions, but whenever you're
okay, I've got one more, and then we'll jump in. So we've talked about kind of some of the negatives, but for such a jaded individual as yourself, David, coming up in the industry, being hardened by all the negativity, what's one thing that you love most about the world of poker, whether it's playing or being involved in the industry? When you wake up, is there part of your day or part of your week that you wake up excited for, and then you're like, oh man, I can't wait to do this thing, or to be with these people, or to have this experience? What do you really love about poker these days?
There are probably two aspects of it that are very different that I really love. One is when I really get into the weeds, when I start studying, when I really try and improve at the game, what a rich, complicated strategy game it is, and really enjoying breaking down hands and analyzing situations and figuring out the baseline, quote unquote, GTO thing, but then trying to figure out what exploits would have worked against both the population, but also maybe a specific person, and how that completely changes on its head the strategy, and just how sort of almost like infinitely rich it is as a game to really excite the mind. And then in a very different way, going to a live event, sitting at a poker table and feeling like anyone could be sat with me. It's usually an incredibly eclectic group of people, all different ages, all different backgrounds, hopefully more than one woman, which is probably, if you're lucky, it's only one, or if you're lucky, it is one, but it's, hopefully would be more as time goes by. Speaking with them, and feeling like, even though it's a completely across the spectrum of all different walks of life group of people, we're sort of united by maybe being on the periphery of society, or maybe being a little degenerate, or maybe being a little subversive, or just titillated by risk in a way that, maybe a lot of people aren't. And just finding those kind of unique qualities of like what links poker players when they are such a diverse group of people. I think that's one of the things I loved, when you just get to talk to your table mates that way.
I love it. That's great. Yeah, I think that's a common, the elegance of the strategy of the game of poker is something that I think, you can have an almost kind of academic crush on, like I certainly love that.
For sure.
And you hardly even get to sort of express a lot of that work on the table at any given game, because you only encounter so many actual decisions in a poker tournament or in a poker cash game. But kind of that mastery of the strategy, that overall strategy view, is something that I think is very attractive to a lot of intellectual players that enjoy the competition of poker. So that makes sense. That's a pretty common answer.
Yeah, and
Joe,
if I could add one other thing, sorry to cut across there, as a commentator, and I suppose also as someone who writes or occasionally will focus a segment of the chip race on a person's achievement or something like that. One of the lovely things I find is that, like, when you can be generous of spirit, this probably is best explained in the commentary booth. When you're commentating on someone playing, maybe you know them, maybe you don't, but you have a generosity of understanding their predicament, particularly if they're a recreational player, lights, camera, action, they're on a feature table for the first time ever, and they take an unusual line. And it's not just like, there's a way you can kind of say, well, it's about vernacular, and it's a way that you can kind of couch poor play in kinder language. But it's not really that. It's actually more about getting into their perspective and into their experience of whatever this is. Maybe it's their first final table and they're outgunned by, the average standard of the table. But like, how are they going to approach it? Are they going to go gung-ho? Are they going to go into their shell a little bit, but maybe try and take advantage of that in an occasional move that maybe is not the perfectly timed one, but still trying to get yourself into their mindset and commentate on what their journey is in a generous way. And then they come back, like you leave the comedy booth when the tournament's over, and they come back to you and say, my mom was watching for the first time ever, and she's always not approved of my poker, but she tuned in because she heard I was on a final, and she said that you said something really nice about me, or the way I was thinking about the game, or whatever it was. They're lovely moments. And would be similar if I was writing about somebody and they come back and they say, oh, all my mates in work who, know I play poker, were given a kind of an access into what I do for the first time and kind of got it at some level. And then I kind of got seen for the first time for my maybe degenerate habit or whatever it is, however you define that, the poker in that person's life. But I think that's like a really lovely moment as well that comes up from time to time. That's quite special for me too.
So I'm going to just shift gears just a little bit, and my question will probably take a minute or two to kind of get through to it, to explain kind of where I'm coming from on it. But I was listening to your recent podcast with Dara concerning, kind of the ongoings of the poker world, and I was very interested by your relation of the poker environment to WWE, with the fact that, well, sometimes people don't understand the, it's really kind of a game and it's an act and different things. And where that connected me to was thinking about when I started, for the recreational sport, we all start watching these videos. And I grew up on Polk's videos. He taught me the language of poker because I had to listen to him listing ranges and things like that. And there was always, it was always the strategy videos. And I listened to strategy videos, and then I would be like, oh, here's another one. Oh, the Jonathan Little's got 16 podcasts. That's a lot of strategy. And I would find out, well, no, like 8 of them are all about be a better person. And let me tell you, as a successful poker player, how to be a better person. I thought, well, maybe that's just Jonathan Little. And then I found Daniel Negreanu doing it. And then all of a sudden the Bryn Kenny stuff comes out where he's making people drink toad poison, or frog poison as a means of bettering their lives. And I'm just struck, because again, as I said many times on this podcast, I'm a psychologist. Why is it that so many poker players in their content creation decide that what they need to do is tell you how, as being a poker player, it's a good way to live your life in general? We never used to do that with Doyle Brunson. Nobody kind of said, well, the poker gunslingers of the past had a great life in terms of that's the way that we all should live. But now it seems to be the case. And given that you've talked to so many people, can you help me out understand that?
Well, firstly, as somebody who's been told to be a better person by Jonathan Little directly, because I do find his moralizing not only hypocritical, but like irritating in the extreme, because I don't think that should be the role for anybody. I think there's an automatic sort of judgmental quality to that. Now, I'm trying to extrapolate that, like, people talk about mental game and how to get into a positive mindset and blah, blah. And I'm quite skeptical of that whole side of poker too. but I understand that there's a sort of an endeavor to be a better overall, there's a holistic kind of be a better overall human being in that. But no, I totally agree with you. I find it not to be having its play above and beyond, like obviously don't, like, unless it's very funny, don't slow roll someone at the table, don't be mean, don't angle shoot, behave ethically, which, by the way, some of the people you've just mentioned don't behave ethically and haven't, and have big skeletons in their own closet. So it's hilarious when they start coming out preaching. I find it strange too. I agree with your comment that it's almost, I think, probably, if I'm trying to get to grips with this now on the spot, I think people who are very good at something immediately assume that they're going to be very good at other things that are wildly different, and they have no expertise and they've no educational background in as well. And you see it all the time. Like, it's kind of a joke, almost a meme. It's like, oh, poker players are expert in crypto this week, and now they're going to be experts in
public health,
revolution,
or
COVID, and yes, exactly. And yeah, that stuff is like does your head in, because I guess we've maybe too much time in our hands as well. But I also think we got very good at a very narrow set of skills. Like, I know you shouldn't overstate it. Poker is a kind of a complicated trick. It's cool. It's an amazingly rich game, like we talked about. But no one would ever say that like chess is life, or and chess is kind of like nearly put up as like the greatest of all games. Poker is not life, and I think people do have a tendency to misapply their occasionally exceptional skills at poker and assume that they can do it in business. They can do it in almost this like pseudo preaching, dare I say, even cultish sort of behavior at times. And I think, whether it's Negreanu or Charlie Carroll or Bryn Kenny or Jonathan Little, certainly, I think there is that kind of behavior from those people where they've sort of put themselves as almost these like overall gurus, and it's sort of like stay in your fucking lane. That makes sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that, expertise is a thing. And it seems like, look, poker players are not unique to that, because, Gwyneth Paltrow is suddenly, a holistic healer with a site that sells goop, and it calls it goop, but everybody still buys it, which I don't understand for a second. But there is a conviction that, and maybe it has to do with the fact that chance plays such a role in poker that everybody over applies that in the concept of, well, now everything that happens at the poker table applies to life. But it really doesn't, because it's a game that it shatters the social contract between us, because you and I, in terms of this conversation, are not going to lie to one another, or at least we're going to have a perception that we're not going to lie. But that's not what happens at a poker table very much. So it's not really a good example of how one should live their lives if you're going to survive very long. So it's just always been kind of a striking thing to me. So
absolutely, and I think maybe Jim will overlap with us here as well, because I know it will come into his sort of wheelhouse too. But if you were to sort of boil it down, it's almost like hyper-capitalism in game form. It's like Monopoly or something, where your incentives are to just win and crush and maximize EV and whatever, which is not how people deal with everyday situations most of the time anyway. There probably are some psychopathic CEOs who live their entire lives that way, but in reality, we live in a much more socialist environment. Even in not very socialist countries, there's huge amount of community driving and community building in all walks of life, in all countries, no matter how right-wing or capitalist those societies are in their structure. So you're right. Like, there was a great article years ago. I forget the name of the guy who wrote it, but he interviewed Jamie Burl, and he interviewed a number of British lefties, for want of a better phrase, who play a lot of poker. And we were sort of like trying to go, well, how can you be both? How can you play the game of poker and be a lefty? And it was great, because I think you can. And I thought they explained the complexity of how you sort of detach within the game, but it has to be only within the game.
Mm-hmm. I think that also, you were speaking before about, in terms of we were speaking about who was attracted to poker, is that a part of the problem with the environment is the fact that people are trying to over apply this very cutthroat game as a means of running your life. And so you ended up with a lot of people who are actually pretty cutthroat coming to the table or being attracted to that particular game. And then it makes it much harder to change the context, even if it's bad for the entire environment to be able to do that. I don't know if that made sense or not, but it's just, it's like it's a double-edged sword. It's like you're trying to teach people the wrong way to be. And by doing so, you attract people who are like, well, I want to be like that because it makes me money. So I will say the interesting reference to Monopoly, I don't know if you're aware, but Monopoly was actually created by a woman who wanted to show socialism and how it worked. And Parker Brothers took the game, changed it to a capitalist society or game, made a ton of money, and didn't give her any of the money. So it's just one nice little trivia piece. But anyway, thank you.
That's a great tidbit. I didn't know that.
This, of course it was. Of course. Hey, at the end of the game, one person has all the money and everyone else is homeless, right? I mean, that's how the game ends. Or you flip the board over, I guess. Joe, did you have any other questions for Dave?
I mean, how is it to put up with Darrell Carney every single day when he's out marathon running? And yesterday you were going to come on, and they said that they were going to talk to some guy from the chip race, and I said, oh well, I gotta live the life of this guy. So it's like I'm out running, I'm trying to get my hair big, and then I find out it's you, and I could have done so much less if I had known it was you coming on. But what's it like to work with somebody who keeps writing books left and right and can spout poker strategy like that?
Yeah, no, look, my sarcastic answer is it's very hard to live with such a ginormous ego who, but in reality, Darrell, he does have a significant ego, but he's not an egocentric person in any way, shape or form. He cares about his legacy. He takes pride in his work. He's a workaholic. And he's an obsessive person in the things that he does. So, when he does running, he runs ultramarathons. And when he does poker at the age of 43, when he took it up, he becomes a 20 tabling online grinder, par excellence. And now is becoming, I think probably little by little, one book at a time, the preeminent author of strategy books of the last, few years. And I think for the next, 5 or 6, when he eventually gets to 10, 12, 15 books, as I imagine he probably will quite quickly, alongside Barry, who is a wonderful foil for him as well, because they work tremendously well together, similarly to the way that Darrell and I work so well together on other projects. I think Darrell is, I'm just very fortunate to have Darrell in my life. When I met him, we immediately hit it off as friends, and have always looked for ways to collaborate on things and bring each other along for the ride on different projects that we find, because we work so well together. We rate each other's opinions. We argue well. And I think that's probably maybe the best single thing you can have in all relationships you have in your life, is if you can argue well with somebody. And, not that there's ever no hard feelings, but there's rarely ever hard feelings. And there is a kind of an understanding that sometimes, and some kinds of arguments are really meant to be a debate of ideas where you both learn from it. So you don't really invest feelings in that, but it's kind of a battle of ideas where you're both getting a lot out of it. Obviously poker is a very clear example when we talk poker hands, but other aspects of life and strategy too. But then I think, just understanding each other's strengths. When I commentate, it's so easy to commentate with Darrell. Now, I love commentating with Ali and with James Dempsey and other people who I've done it with more recently, and I'm finding different gears and other ways to work with them. But with Darrell, it's just so easy because I know how to tee. I know his stories to tee up, so I know how we know how to pass the ball back and forth so seamlessly, because we've just been doing it for so long now, over so many segments of the show and whatever it is, that we know each other's strengths and we know when to pass it to the other person. And to come back to the ego thing, because I think people would think of me as someone with quite a big ego in another way too. I think we both understand that it's a collaboration and that it has to be a partnership, and that yes, there will be times when one or other of us will get more spotlight, you know, in the context of different things, but then the other person supports them when they do. And there's no jealousy. Like Dara success is my success and vice versa. It happens to be also financially true because we generally swap in everything we play. So, you know, even if there was a danger that there would be some begrudgery, there can't be, because the other person will make some money too. But, you know, but to be honest, even if that wasn't the case, I know that like he'd be the first person on my rail if he had no piece of me, and vice versa. Like there was a funny one about maybe 2 years ago, the World Series that happened just after the COVID lockdowns were lifted, so we could dart into Vegas right at the last moment to play like day 2 of the main. We actually read straight into day 2. I had a great World Series, and Darrell was actually having a really lousy one. And every day, you know, just the way variance is, I was just running up stacks and going deep. And the minute I bust the main in 200th, I jumped into the 8-at-8 tournament and came 30th. And that was thousands of runners. Jumped straight into another thing with 1,000 runners, ended up coming top 40 of that. And you know, that would have been very easy for Dara to be sitting there going, fucking Dave, you know, because Dara's a much better player than me, is getting all the luck on this trip. And, you know, he wasn't having, you know, he had some cashes, but he wasn't having that kind of result yet. And every day he was there. Do you need a coffee at the break? He was popping by whenever he had breaks on his game to check on me. I was running hands by him constantly. I had that support network, which was so important. And then it was so lovely that at the end of the festival, and he'd run really shit, we jump in the final turbo. I bust. It's a 1K turbo. It's going to be over in a day, but it's going to be a long day. And Darrell just, you know, he short stacked, but like everything short stacked in that tournament, it was so shallow. He went deeper and deeper and deeper. And I literally filmed the whole thing like a proud dad on the rail. Whenever he had a showdown, I was zooming in. I was able to put it together as like you could nearly like know what his whole tournament was like, because I captured every fucking hand of significance. And it was like I was just like his little pet on the rail, so delighted to like see him go deeper, win his flips and whatever was going on. And it, like, I imagine people were like looking at us going, these fucking saps. Like, look at the state of them, like him with his like mate on the sideline, you know, whooping like a fool. But that's genuinely how we feel about each other doing well and how we'll support each other. And I think that's hugely important. But to come back to your original point, I'm very sorry you took an unnecessary run yesterday.
It's okay. My heart loves me for it. You know, the reason is not just to say nice things about Dara, you know, on the site, but it's when I am choosing the different. So when so poker's a very lonely game, right? And I don't need poker to survive. I do it because I enjoy it. And when I listen to your podcast, you know, when I started listening to it, it felt kind of like there was a camaraderie about everybody that's involved. I don't know Barry very well, so you know, I'm sure he's lovely as well. But it seems somewhat genuine, and I think that for recreational pokers in particular, it's like, and what we say about rec poker here is that it's that community, that ability when you do have a score. Because like my wife doesn't care. I mean, she's lovely, but she's like, "Oh, you won. That's great," and then she moves on, and she doesn't care about all the details. Whereas you kind of need those people that are like living with you on every hand, every time you put an update on the site, saying, you know, I'm there with you, or let me talk about that hand, you know, even talk about bad beat stories, which if you ever want to listen to my video, it's a great discussion of why that's okay. You know, it's just to be able to have that community. And I think that what your podcast, beyond having great information and great discussions, brings that feeling of like, yeah, you can be friends with people in the poker world, and it's not just sitting in your own house, clicking on a button and getting pissed every time you get run out on. So kudos to you guys, because you do put on a good show.
Thank you very much for saying that. That's the nicest thing to hear, because that is the absolute point of the show. When we came into the podcast space, or if you want to call it that, Andrew Brokos is brilliant, Thinking Poker, and that show was like, you know, basically Darren, my favorite. Joey was doing his thing. Probably not a format I love as much, because that sort of long form, I always feel like, oh, there was a great 45 minutes in that 2.5 hours. Why couldn't I just listen to that 45 minutes? But, you know, that some people love that format. But we wanted to be a reaction to that at some level. And we wanted to find ways to showcase all aspects of the game, because one thing some of the big hosts do, like Joey, is they basically just have the really famous people in poker on the show, and that's great. And obviously they get great ratings and they do a great job at what their show is about. But that wasn't what we wanted to do. We wanted to have strategy. We wanted to have a topical segment so we could sort of, express ourselves and express a bit of opinion on things we thought. And we wanted to interview a well-known person, so we'd have a name on the tin and the show could do well, and also hopefully we would do a good interview with them. But I've always said that second interview that we do, the shorter interview, which is the second of the 5 segments, is nearly the most important to me, because almost always they're going to be people who aren't being asked on podcasts too often or at all. And they have really interesting stories because we know them probably somehow through the industry, through friendship or whatever. And we want to showcase that because it helps us tell a broader picture of what the poker world's all about. And then on top of that, we have our own little almost like set rules about percentages of, different demographics. Because again, we want the show to be about the chip race. We want it to be about everyone who plays poker and not ever too much of one thing. So even though we know if we lean into one demographic for our lead or whatever, we know that show mightn't perform quite as well as if we led into, I don't know, Phil Galfond, who's going to be on the next show, going to be a guaranteed smash, obviously. But you don't have someone like that on every week. But the point is that by casting the net so wide and trying to capture all of poker as best we can, everybody will enjoy 3/4 of the show and hopefully therefore tune into all of it, because even the bit that they're not as into and is not the bit of the world that they love the most or feel as much of a connection to, they'll forgive it because they enjoy enough of the rest. And therefore we hopefully get the broadest possible audience from that.
David, sorry, Joe, just one second. I know you said you had something coming up after this. Do you have a few more minutes to take some questions?
Work away. No, I actually don't. It's more that at some point there will be a very loud noise of my children arriving back from school.
Okay, all right, that sounds good.
But I'll know when that happens, and maybe, just maybe, they won't be too loud at the beginning.
Okay, well, I'm really enjoying this. So if we've got time for a few more questions,
keep going.
Yeah, all right, Joe, please continue.
By the way, and so I saw pictures of your kids on your Twitter feed. So I'm hoping, they're very, very cute, and I think you did a great thing in terms of it was Pakistan, I believe, that your second son was adopted from.
Nico's from India, Aurangabad in India originally. So yeah, we did quite the voyage through Cyprus to Istanbul to Delhi down to Aurangabad to collect him about 3.5 months ago. And he's fantastic. We're having a great time. We're the lucky ones. He's a great lad.
Yeah, that's great. I was going to just kind of follow up that, so I am a pretty big fan of the Thinking Poker podcast, and Andrew Brokus is and Carlos Wells, for that matter, are doing some pretty great things over there. But I do think your point about representation in terms of giving other people the spotlight for a little while, because when people come to listen to Phil Galfond, they're going to stay and listen to the secondary part. And the more that, going and playing poker is not great if it's all just a bunch of white guys who are jerks sitting around screaming at you, because it doesn't feel like it's kind of you. And granted, I know that I fit most of that. I don't do a lot of screaming, but for a lot of people, they just don't feel like it's a place to come. And I think giving just, even if it's another white guy who's bad at poker, giving them a chance to tell their story and what they like about it means that people feel much more comfortable with that it's a game for them. And even if they can't sit and run sims, they can still play and feel like they've kind of moved up that ladder, and have a chance to win, much more so than, say, in chess, where the price for entry it can be pretty high, and to get pretty good, you got to work pretty hard, and you still probably lose, and no chance of ever winning the main event in, I don't know what chess main event is. So I think that's a real important thing to do.
Yeah, I think Andrew and Thinking Poker do exactly what we do, but they just have one guest per show. So I always was worried that if the guest is the less famous guest that week, well, a lot of people just kind of pick their content by going, who've they got on this week? And I always felt like, well, if we have 5 people on or 4 people on any given week, they'll see 2 they like or something. And then but those guys are brave enough to just, choose. I'm pretty sure it's like Andrew is the consistent thread through it all, but Carlos too now. These days, they just choose someone they're interested in talking to, and they make that the show, and it's a fucking brilliant show. So kudos to them for being braver than us in a way, to not always have a big name on the tin every week, but just have the confidence that their audience is so loyal and knows, they're always getting a great show out of them, that they'll tune in anyway.
Great. Well, thank you.
So I got one more serious question, David. So you and I both studied philosophy coming up in school, and we've talked privately about how that's kind of informed our worldview and kind of the way that it intersects with, I don't know. Don't let me put words in your mouth. Well, how do you find that your studies in philosophy have helped you as a poker player, but also to sort of navigate the world as a person?
I think you'll probably be able to relate to what I'm about to say, which is that I find it very hard to imagine the world without having been through that. So I don't know what the difference would be, but I do know that it probably sharpens a bullshit detector. It probably, at some sort of very basic level, gives you good argumentative skills, good logic, which is, a definite positive, because, there's too much behavior in the world that lacks logic, and that's not good. In my view, I think, unless it's unless it's a Dada painting or piece of art, I like there to be a kind of a thread of logic, in decision making and whatever it is. So I think embracing the rational is a good thing. Not to say that we would, prioritize it over the emotional. I think that's probably a journey I've gone on, where I think I probably was too much inside my own head in my teens and 20s, and then it's sort of like getting back in touch with your feelings as you get older becomes maybe the challenge, or at least it was for me. As a writer as well, like I used to be in the kind of the world of screenwriting, but not for very long, but in a very kind of passionate way. And I think I was very good at structuring a script, and I was very good at coming up with a great idea for a story, but I probably needed help really becoming like the emotional conductor that you need to be as well to really nail a script and to really like pull the heartstrings. And I think maybe if I went back to that world now, I could do that better. Maybe I will at some point. But the philosophy, I suppose, for me, overlapped so much. Now, this won't be everyone's philosophical backdrop, but because I was probably more in the continental strand, it was probably more like existentialists, and that then sort of drifted into, I guess for me, it was like hermeneutic philosophy became the area of interest. Now, before I lose all of your listeners, hermeneutics is sort of an area of philosophy that almost believes in like a third way, that rather than there be a subjective and an objective viewpoint, there's actually like a third in between, which is about sort of an ever-moving dynamic where meaning is contained within something that's sort of fleeting and always changing. And that became an area of philosophy that I became fascinated by, and realized there was a huge amount of overlap with that area in a lot of literature. So my interest in philosophy moved into literature, or the literary side of philosophy. And then, almost because like it has to, in a way, when you're investing in characters and in stories, a lot of psychology and a lot of even psychoanalysis became part of that. And again, I think there's a big overlap between psychoanalysis and philosophy in, people like Freud could certainly be considered a philosopher of sorts. Nietzsche could be considered almost like a psychoanalyst of sorts. Marx, if you want to kind of put a political bent on it, could also be in both camps. He could be a hermeneutic philosopher, or maybe even a psychoanalyst of the zeitgeist at some level too. So I don't know. I think that became what really fascinated me about philosophy. My thesis ended up being in this kind of overlap between a lot of Irish literature and hermeneutic philosophy. But I think it was the stories that came from that. It was the exposure to all the stories, to all the theater, to all the, myths as well, like myths and legends that became like a huge amount of Greek philosophy, or a huge amount of Greek myth as well, that informed sort of like how I have both view the world, but also how I think about characters, and how I sort of there's a thing in screenwriting called the Enneagram, where you sort of almost pigeonhole character archetypes. It's very useful at the beginning stages of writing character, as you're trying to figure out how would people work dynamically with one another. You end up having to kind of change them because it's too crude, but it's very good starting point for that kind of stuff. So I think in a way, when you're writing about people, you're absorbing people, you're putting them onto these archetypes, and you're sort of fleshing them out with mixtures of different things. So I think it's like becomes like how you almost like observe or interact with the world. So I don't know, put in a poker context, friends you make along the way, characters, people in poker hands and the way they acted or behaved, how you sort of archetype their behavior and maybe put them into personality types and sort of maybe sometimes make quicker judgments about them than you should, but use that as a way to profile them, which maybe is useful in poker, because you want to be able to like tap into what they're capable of. That was a very long-winded answer.
No, that's typical of a philosopher. No, I think that's a really good answer. And I think I hear that also like Chris Jones, who's very, very involved in what we do here at Rec Poker. He also has a literary background, and he talks about like the storytelling of poker hands. And, that sense of knowing when something's incongruous or when it just doesn't quite actually make sense. And I think there's also this element of, as poker players, we're dealing with people for a pretty finite amount of time. And I think making judgments about them, making general judgments about them based on the limited information that we have is, right or wrong. It's going to be a way that we make assumptions and we put them in boxes and we, decide what that means about the range of hands that they're playing or how they might play certain things. So being able to kind of do that more quickly or more efficiently or with less objective information seems like that would be a real natural advantage as a player.
I just wanted to just make a brief comment on that, because I think that what had occurred to me as you were talking is when you look at literature, when you look at psychology, when you look at behavioral economics, when you look at philosophy, you look at all of these different things, which are all fields that tend to bring poker players kind of together along with some engineers and some people, maybe math guys and so on, who come in. And it's like, people often say that, well, playing well poker is reading tells and things like that, but it's not. The part of the game that isn't the math part is the understanding of human behavior put into complex situations, particularly with chance associated with it. And so all of the different fields that I've listed and you were listing in terms of, I guess a philosopher could be a psychoanalyst, is that the commonality among those things is understanding human behavior in stress and non-stressful situations combined to be able to make determinations. Because if you write a script and you write humans that don't make sense, people hate your script, right? They get it, they pick it, they can't tell you why it's off, but they'll say that person wouldn't do that. And everybody tends to agree in terms of it just pierces the suspension of disbelief that you have. And I think that kind of overarcs what poker at times is bringing all those people who are trying to understand humans to win their money, but really to understand how to outplay them by knowing how they're going to behave. And because we're such a random bunch of people in a lot of aspects, it gets very, very difficult. And that's why these fields continue not to have been solved in the way that we would have hoped after thousands of years.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you said there about stressful situations, because you're absolutely right. Maybe at the beginning of the tournament, people are pretty okay with this, their equity is what they bought in for, it's all sort of fine. But when you get close to the final table, and maybe it's life-changing money to sometimes, or even just significant money that they'd like to have, or even just the idea of being down to the last two tables, and even if it's not huge money, feeling the pressure of now, like every decision you make matters more. When you think about writing or screenwriting or any kind of character writing, it's about putting your characters under pressure. So when you're putting a script together, you're basically going, well, here's my character type. here's a bit of this person I know. I'm going to put some dad issues on that. I'm going to add a backstory that's complicated. I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to give it a complicated love life. But then you're like, okay, well, what's the inciting incident? What's the moment that I can like basically drop an anvil on this person and like put them under extreme pressure where their morality will be tested, where their decision making and logical faculties will be tested, where their emotional EQ or whatever, you know, will be tested, and what will they do now when they're put under that pressure? And I think, yeah, there's a very easy you know, comparison to poker where, yeah, like people are put under pressure by the financial weight of decisions as they go deeper in a poker tournament, or even just, you know, being put all in for $500 on the river, which is the whole stack you have in front of you in your cash game. That's, you know, not even a huge amount of your net worth, but like it matters to you because you've spent the whole night there playing with this stack. Like whatever it is, I think that's, yeah, I think that was really smart insight there about the adding the stressful component. I think that's hugely important.
It's fascinating to watch people who are drinking alcohol, losing money, and under stress to see how they behave, because it really reveals who you are in a lot of respects very quickly. So.
Yeah, character. You don't know your character until you've been tested, right? So putting yourself to the test in competition and that sort of thing. I can see how that would be true. And I mean, you know, maybe that's why we see so many rough edges at the poker table, because, you know, people have kind of what did you say, David? Someone Darrell had applied some sandpaper to you to polish you up a little bit. I mean, maybe when they're in, or they're less polished.
Oh, I don't think he's applied any polish yet. I think we're just still in the sandpaper phase.
Well, that's a good segue to one of the last questions we're going to have for you today. This interview has gone super long. I really appreciate this time, David. I know our audience will appreciate it. What's one remaining unrealized goal or dream for you within the poker world, either as a player or as an industry professional? What's a peak that you've yet to hit that you kind of feel like, and I'm going to put a little more pressure on you, that you sort of feel like, you know, your journey won't be complete unless you've done this thing that you haven't done yet. Is there such a thing, and what is it?
I'm going to be honest. If there's an ambition still, it's to win something big. I'm not going to lie about that. Both the financial benefit of that would matter a lot to me, and the sort of like feather in the cap, or feeling like that it was like a big result, World Series bracelet, for example, Irish Open, you know, anything kind of somewhat major, that would matter a lot to me, because I think I still, particularly in this phase, little doubts creep in about how serious a poker player I am. And I know when I'm sitting there, particularly if I've, you know, it's a period of the year where I have done my study and I am like trying to be sharp, and I've put the content to one side, or at least made it slightly less important for a period so that I could sharpen up again. I know I go out there and I give it my all. I know I play really well, and on a good day, I play really, really well. And, you know, I need to get lucky on that same day, you know, of course, like poker is. But just for a bit of conversion, like I had a lot of very annoyingly deep runs in very large field events over the last maybe like 3 years since the COVID lockdowns and we all opened back up again. I think I've come like top 0.3, 0.5% of like multi-thousand runner fields, maybe like 4 or 5 times in the last 3 years. And that's great, because that's like really deep run, but it's like last 3 tables. And, you know, making that final table, or even, you know, God forbid, winning or top 3ing or whatever, both financially would have been huge, but would have been that sort of sense of like not being an also-ran, like kind of like really getting to the end and being a finisher. And I don't feel like I made any, sure I made some mistakes along the way, even in that like late game, but like nothing major. And it was literally just, you know, that bit of poor luck in the you know, got incredibly lucky to win loads of flips on the way there, no doubt, but just not getting that extra couple. And yeah, I suppose because maybe I've split myself in the way that I have into areas of the industry which you have more control of. Like you can You can be a good ambassador and just do your job well, and it's like you put in the hours. You can be a good content creator by prepping your interview and delivering it well and cutting it as well as you can afterwards. You can write your articles. You can spend that extra half hour in the coffee shop in the morning really making it a better article and put out, and so you can directly put your time into making it better. Whereas in poker, that's not the same thing. You also need that little bit of good fortune, or you need that other thing. And I think that's probably the thing then that would be very satisfying. It would be very satisfying to be in the winner's enclosure in something major at some point in the next couple of years. I don't plan on leaving poker full stop. So like if that was to be, a few years down the line, or maybe several times over the next 20 years, that's also fine.
Yeah.
But but when it comes, that will be probably something that will be very pleasing.
Joe?
It's interesting that you say that, because again, I think in your last podcast you talked about one of the guy you were interviewing was the jack of all trades, master of none, right? That he
was that Brent?
Yes. And what I'm struck by is something that I often talk with my students about, is that in psychology, you can go a lot of different directions in terms of research, in terms of clinical work, in terms of money that you can make or not make. It's not poker money, but it's good money. And no matter which way that you go and you look, you're always going to have regrets of some sort, because you cannot be good at everything. You can't pursue 100% 6 different things, because that obviously 600% is not it. And I what I hear a lot is the struggle that you have in terms of, well, I need to study more, but I'm also doing this and I'm screenwriting. And similar to me and a lot of my students, I just feel pulled in a lot of different directions. And no matter what you do, and now you've got kids, right? And so now you've got this other piece of time that you can't just spend 60 hours a day grinding Sims, and you're going to regret that. I'm sorry, you just are. But it's like trying to maximize that of what you are and deal with the regret that you have. But let me fix one problem for you. So we have this coveted bronze pin that I think would absolutely, if you would win our community home game, you could get that bronze pin, and then maybe that hole in your life would feel.
That would feel good. That would feel good.
Yeah. So I mean,
does that bronze pin come with the amount of money I could buy a house with?
Maybe like a Lego house.
Monopoly house, yeah. Monopoly house.
Yeah, that's right. It is one of the great coveted awards in poker, David. I just want you to know.
No, absolutely. No.
So that actually made that just you led into. I wasn't even going to ask this, but you led into one last question I have here, which is, we talk about as poker players not being results oriented in our decision making, and just like making good poker decisions. And is it a problem that our industry is based around this clout and legitimacy that is conferred by people winning large poker tournaments? Like, it feels like it's very results oriented. The way that we classify who's expert, or who's what's the word I'm looking for, like a credible person to talk to about poker, based on these. If you win a lot of tournaments, it's easy to say you've got a skill edge over the field. But so many of us live players, we're just never going to be able to play enough tournaments to actually realize our skill edge. Is there another way to do it? Is it a problem?
I suppose you can play small field stuff, which I think is a way to actualize your edge and then feel like you're getting more of the feedback. It's relative, obviously. Even playing 100-runner fields will take a while for you to really manifest the right amount of equity back to you or whatever. But yeah, of course, that would happen. So I would sort of advise people, and I often do advise people, don't fixate on the big result. Like, Darrell has a great blog from years ago called Boxes, and it sort of distills perfectly like nearly the best poker advice you could give, which is that if you're an online player, don't think about your screen as like what's up top in every tournament. Stop thinking that way. Just figure out, as best you can guess, your EV in every tournament, and you have postage stamps all across your screen, and each one is a box, and each one is worth $5. That one's worth $6. That's a turbo. It's only worth $3, but it'll be off my screen sooner, blah, blah, blah. And that's where they all are lined up in a row. And in the end, you'll hopefully actualize, that money in the long term. And if you play huge mass field tournaments, which I do chase those big scores, the bit of glory, the big one a few times a year, more than a few times a year. But if you play smaller fields, then you will get the feedback. You'll get the final table experience more often. You'll get a lot of those things. So I do think there's a fixation on these like mass, huge field tournaments online, where actually most of what I do when I play online these days is play like 200 runner fields at a decent buy-in. And yes, okay, maybe the glory chasing deader money mightn't be in that one because they'll be in the thing that's got the biggest up top. That'll play till 4 a.m. But you'll actualize the edge more often. And in doing so, you're kind to yourself. You're managing your own emotions. It's a bit like bankroll management too. It's like, if you're good at like losing half your roll and rebuilding, going down a stake level or whatever, then you can probably take more shots. If you get emotionally racked by that, if that like really upsets you and makes you not want to get out of bed the next morning, makes you less likely to play, makes your play worse, makes you tilt, makes you unlikely to pull the trigger on the bluff, makes you scared money around the bubble, then it's devastating for you not to manage your game in a more low variance way, because you can't handle the variance as well as someone else who can. Mm-hmm. So I would actually define myself as someone who doesn't handle the variance that great. I've always been really hurt, sort of like in every way, by the larger downswings I've had, and they've made me like sick to my stomach. So I really have geared my whole career around not chasing those huge results by playing huge runner fields and actually actually lowering the variance by playing smaller runner fields. And I think that's actually a great help. And it's been a way to be kind to myself and manage myself as a poker player better. And that can also be manifested in swapping action, selling pieces, different ways that you can lower variance. Like the enemy in poker is variance. It's like in some sense, it's like the other players. Of course, they're all villains. But really, the biggest villain is the variance, because that chews you up and spits you out more than any of the other players really ever do. And that's been the cause of more careers ending that I've seen. I've been playing poker for 17 years, never been the best player amongst my friends playing poker, but I've always been pretty good. But way better players than me have been way better than me and made heaps of money, and then become way worse than me and then disappeared out of the game over and over and over again in 3, 5, 6 year cycles over that 17 years. But what I was always good at was managing myself as a poker player better than them, even though I wasn't as good a poker player. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I think that's true. Well, David, this is probably one of our longest interviews ever. I really have enjoyed this conversation. One last question before we go, and it's going to be impossible to quantify this accurately, but it's an important question. I want you to try your best. So approximately how many hours each morning would you say you spend on the hair?
On my hair? I there's no quantifying, like literally 0 seconds.
You mean that just happens? You just wake out of bed like that?
Yeah, no, my hair just spikes naturally. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a similar position. That's why I can't. I have to wear a hat. I tell you why.
Okay, so I only wash my hair once a week. Oh. And I clean my head with a salt scrub or a sand scrub, whichever I happen to have every day. And I use shampoo like maybe every 8 to 10 days, but the rest of the time I just wash it with water. So there's a natural bit of spike in it.
There you go.
And I recommend that because I think most of those shampoos are like terrible for your hair. That's why I have all my hair still at 41. So
true.
Maybe there's something to it.
There you go. Beauty tips from Dave.
Interesting fact about shampoo is that
but you got to clean your head or else you will smell. So you don't want it to smell.
Okay.
So you scrub your head, but you don't clean your hair.
Shampoo actually strips out a lot of the things that your hair needs, and that's why we have to condition after the fact, because we have to put all that stuff in, and so it's kind of a weird process. But
I love that you thought like I spend time on this though. That's
well, it's
great.
So stylish. I mean, it's just like in every photo I see of you, you're rocking this awesome do. I just assumed it was something intentional.
No, I hate to.
I can ask her if she likes your hairstyle.
Can we cut that question now? I don't want it to see. Now that people think I spend hours on my look, I want to maintain that image. You peeled back the
Just-
curtain. It's no good.
No, I think we have to keep it in so that people know that we left literally no stone unturned today in the conversation. David, thank you so much. I can't imagine there's anything that we didn't ask you about, but if folks want to find out more about what you're getting up to, or to contact you directly, like where's the one place you'd like people to go, or what's the one thing you'd like people to check out to get more David Lappin in their lives?
Yeah, well, firstly, I would recommend not getting more David Lappin in your life. I imagine whatever amount of David Lappin you have, it's plenty. But if you do ever want to ask me a question about anything, I live on Twitter. I definitely spend an hour a day on Twitter, whether it's pushing articles or promoting the show or just using it as a way to get my news or following the, incredibly awesome and sometimes deranged community of ours. So
it's a hellscape, David. You can
my
say
DMs are pretty much always open because I follow back everybody pretty much. So you can always find me there.
There you go. And that's at DK Lappin on Twitter. Do check him out. He's a lot of fun on there. Almost as much fun as he is here on the Rec Poker podcast. So thank you again, David. I'll look forward to maybe connecting in Vegas this summer. I'm heading down there in June. So look forward to putting a cold drink in your hands if our paths cross.
Unfortunately, I'm only going for the main event fortnight, so I won't be there in June. But if you win one of the 1500s early, then you'll come back for the main.
That sounds like a good deal. Yeah, all right, that sign me up.
There we go.
So let's just manifest that in the universe, David. Let's all work together here, Joe. I'm counting on you too. All right, fantastic. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, David. We'll head back to the rest of the podcast now. Thanks.
All right. This is one of my favorite parts of the show. I think that might be one of our best interviews ever. David is such a fascinating character. He's so plugged into the poker industry, and hearing some of those stories. And boy, it's nice when he and Darrell Carney are very close. They host the chip race together. They work on a lot of projects together. And so to hear David really come out with some of those harsh truths about Darrell's personal life and some of those. I wasn't expecting that. I really thought, those two were joined at the hip, but it's nice to know. It's nice to know.
Realistically, how could it not be a good interview with David Lappin? Especially when, the story about the tightrope and the balancing act was there and the juggler and the knives and the flames. That was just amazing.
I thought that would have been impressive even if the chainsaws were not on fire. But the fact that the chainsaws themselves were on fire, that just really took it to a whole new level.
Right.
Yeah. Joe, you got something there?
No, I'm just interested that, well, no, I'm going to let that one go. So.
But in all seriousness, I hope that was a great interview. We haven't had a chance to talk to David yet, but we're going to. Usually Rob has all sorts of great insights that he's looking forward to. Like Rob, I always feel like Rob does enough research on these episodes that he knows enough about the guest that he's like, oh yeah, I really liked how he talked about, writing that book or whatever. What do you got for us this week?
Not much, but right now, in our poll, our Twitter poll for our next book, Optimizing or GTO Simplified is the forerunner right now. So looks like might be doing another Darrell Carney book. In spite of everything David talked about. I mean, I think maybe Barry, Carter being part of it will help soften the blow of using another Darrell book, so there you go.
Yeah.
There it is.
And as Joe has pointed out before, I really prefer the title they landed on, GTO Poker Simplified, over some of the working titles out there like GTO Overcomplicated. I just think this was a much better decision. You can see the copies flying off the shelves as a consequence. All right. So that was a fun interview with David, or for all we know. Why don't we, folks, if you want to start typing the word food bank into the chat here, this is the part of the show where we're going to do a raffle. We're going to give away some prizes. And the way that we do it, just to raise awareness about food insecurity, is we just ask players to type the words food bank into the chat, not because doing so actually puts any food in anyone's belly, but because maybe us talking about it will encourage someone to go and make a donation, whether it's time, money, or a non-perishable food item you'd be surprised how many people, maybe in your own neighborhood or in your own community, need a little help every once in a while, putting food on the table for themselves or their family. And so it's just a nice way to help your neighbor, is to help your local food bank. So if folks start typing the words food bank into the chat now, as I see they're doing, we'll do a draw right after John Somsky tells us about some home game results, and then we'll see who's going to be the prize winner. Now, John, there's a non-zero chance that your mic is not being carried. No one's telling me this, but I'm just saying, please do continue talking about the home games. And if we interrupt you, it might actually not be out of malice. You never know. But we'll assume that everyone can hear you. And folks, if you can't hear John Somsky, please let us know in the YouTube chat.
I think they would have let us know already, when I was making those horrible jokes. Or maybe because they couldn't hear, that's why they didn't complain. You never know.
I thought there was a bit of like a deadpan response, and maybe that could have had something to do with it.
Yeah, could be. Well, on May 15th, J.S. Edom, Jeff S. got his first nightly victory for the year.
Nice.
Mzadi 2, Samil Zahari got his first nightly victory for the year.
We got a new one in here. All right, I'm so glad we're still tripping John up after like 500 of these a year. We still every once in a while find one. Because
as I was creating the slides, practiced that one because I knew it was going to be hard, and I still can't do it.
That's awesome.
Then we have Graphic 16, Roger Schutte got his second nightly victory for the year. Les Paul 99, Michael Pinciero got his first nightly victory for the year. Ron Payton got his first nightly victory for the year. And Keck Geek, that is Keck Geek Sr., got his fifth nightly victory for the year. That's his 32nd lifetime victory. I think he is trying to take the lead over his son. That's my current suspicion.
That's tough sledding right there. Those two are some excellent poker players. Doesn't surprise me that they're climbing the ranks.
Yep, no surprise at all. Then we have Luke O'Driscoll. He got his first daily mixed victory of the year. And that's not surprising if you remember, I believe he won the last two mixed championship events.
Wow. Oh, yeah, right. Guy's on a roll. That's amazing. Yep. Congratulations.
East Coast spitter Ben Emslow, also known as B-Jammin, got his third international victory for the year. And Ivor Big One got his first international victory for the year. And then XX Angry Fish XX got his or her first daily LPP victory for the year and first rec poker victory ever. So he or she can contact Jim at rec.poker for their free month at Learn Pro Poker.
I think we're going to have a new rule that in terms of names that people are using have to take into account John's ability to pronounce them, so we don't get an explicit rating at some point for the podcast.
Yeah, that's right. We'll work around that in our planning meeting, see what we can come up with.
Well, either that or, Roger Schutte edits it, right? He'll have to figure out how to do a beep on it.
I love it. So a couple things coming out of that. So that's amazing. So Ben is a regular in the international series. So Ben Enslow, who's a Wrecking Crew member, plays every Saturday on Twitch, and you can join him and watch along as he plays in the morning and the afternoon game with all his friends there on Twitch. I believe
that's his 15th international victory.
Yeah. He loves those international tournaments on Saturday mornings and Saturday afternoons. And it's a smaller field those days. So, folks, if you're not everyone's available to come play every night at 9 o'clock Eastern. That's why we call them the international series, because they're earlier in the day. So people in other time zones or people that are busy in the evening can get a chance to come and play. But so that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that Ben is continuing to rock those, because
I also just want to clarify, everyone, regardless of where you live, are welcome to play in any event, no matter what the series name might happen to be. So international is not restricted to international players, and all of our events welcome international players, even if they are Canadian.
I think Ben's time zone is like 6 hours ahead of ours, right? I mean, he's
Oh.
just way
Yes.
east.
He is quite east. He's even east
So
of me. That's right.
it's very difficult for him to play that late at night, because I'm sure he has to get up sometime in the morning. You
Good
can't
point.
be just playing until 2 in the morning every morning.
That's right. Yeah, we should tell folks like him and Josh Campbell, Torinar, who's another premium member. He has to get up. I won't dox the guy that bad. He has to get up. He has to get up pretty early for his day job as well. So maybe he'd have a little more fun on Saturday instead of having to stay up till 2 a.m. on the East Coast with some of those tournaments. But yeah, congratulations to Ben. That's great. And I also want to say so. Who was the winner, John? Who's going to email me at LPP about their LPP win this week?
XX Angry Fish XX.
All right, XX Angry Fish XX. You're actually the first person that I'm going to tell this to. If you're a regular listener, you know that I am always behind on my emails. I struggle with my emails. There's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes on around here, keeping the website going and keeping the community vibrant and encouraging. And I won't go into it, but one thing we're doing is I'm getting a little help sorting through some of my emails. So instead of emailing jim@rec.poker xx angryfishxx, send an email to info@rec.poker. And if John, if you can note the slides for future comments, and if folks, you can always email me, jim@recpoker, if there's something that I can help you with. But if there's something a little more general, please start using that info@rec.poker email address. And I'm really excited. We've got a couple more people joining the team that are going to help us make Rec Poker even greater than it already is. If you can imagine such a thing. I know I'm struggling. I'm struggling to. It doesn't seem possible. That's what we do. So let me see. I'm going to start pulling out some. Oh, I see we got the Penny and Luck Poker Club in the chat tonight. That's fantastic. That's longtime Rec Poker buddy Woody Adams down there. I was going to say in Pennsylvania, but he's actually down in Nevada now, from what I understand, and got some good news recently. So Woody, thanks for tuning in, man. And I hope that we get a chance to call your name when we do our little roll here, our little raffle here, to see who's going to win the prize. So let's see whose names are we going to call here. Looks like the first one. And John, why don't you back me up here to make sure there's no confusion about the order of these names as they come in. The first one I see is Luke, then Mary, then Anne Marie, then Jim, then Dave, then Woody, and I look like 6. That looks like 6 to me. Is that the same you see?
That's what I see.
All right. Well, then we're just going to roll a boring old 6-sided die here. It's just nothing nerdy about it. It's just a normal 6-sided die. No ISO cam. We're still working on the technology for this. It's anything but a 1. Actually, I shouldn't say anything but a 1 because who was the first person? Luke. I don't want to, Luke, I'm not trying to freeze you out. I roll a lot of 1s. So it would be nice if this was something other than, let's see. But now I kind of hope it is a 1 because I feel bad for Luke. Okay. It's a 5. But I think we're going to count that. It kind of went off the desk a bit, but I think we're going to count. Who was our number 5? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Evil Roy Slade. Oh my God. Dave Westerveld just continues to win everything in life at Rec.
You should have rolled it over. I think it's a misroll. I think you should have rolled it over.
I think, yeah. And let's do another one because all these
Dave.
folks have showed up. All these folks have showed up. No, Dave, we're going to give you your prize. But all these folks showed up for an interview. We don't even have freaking David K Lappin here in the house. The least we could do is give away a second prize.
So my presence isn't enough. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right.
I showed up.
Yeah, the guy hosts for 1 week, and now all of a sudden. Oh, but no, I do want to thank you, Joe, for sitting in the hosting chair last week. It was, I'm sure everyone at Rec Poker got a kick out of hearing someone's voice other than mine. But it made a big.
I kept the seat warm, and that was about it. So it's all you. You're the guy.
All right. Well, let's roll again. We're going to give away 2 prizes tonight. No, I know Dave's saying re-roll, but Dave, you're too generous. We're going to give you your prize anyway, and we're going to roll again and give a second prize away as well. Here we go. Who's it going to be? A 6. All right. Well, I think that's our man Woody, right? Was the last one to get his name in there. So Dave, you know the rules. Woody, welcome back, my friend. Send an email, please, to info@rec.poker, and we're going to get you all hooked up with some awesome prizes. I can't wait to reward the people that come here to YouTube for free on Monday nights and hang out with us for these interviews and these fun conversations that we have. Um, and of course, premium members can also join us. Usually after the podcast, we record the forums edition of the podcast over Zoom, and premium members are welcome to join us for that. But you do have to be a premium member. You got to drop that $5 and get your first month with the code RECPOKER for peanuts. All right, so that's that. Let me see, what else can we talk about? We're going to be, Luke says, Jim, plug the Rec Poker merch because I'm about to order. Anything I need to do to get pins sent at the same time? Awesome question, Luke. And Luke, congratulations on, you've been on a roll. So the way we do the pins now, I actually mail the pins out from my place, and I've got them here at Rec Poker Command Central. All the merch is handled through a third-party provider. So when you order stuff through the Rec Poker shop, that actually comes directly to your door in no time flat from a merchandise supplier who has our designs. And it was just way easier than me ordering it, getting it here, shipping it out to our members. So we don't send the pins out with the merch anymore. So there's no coordination there. But if you do have some pins coming, it's as simple as just going to the Rec Poker shop. There's a category there for membership and more. You can see pins and patches and that kind of stuff in there. If you just cover the shipping and handling on the pins, I will make sure to send that off. And I know you've got a couple coming because we've been hearing Luke O'Driscoll quite a bit here on the podcast in the Inner Circle recently. So please do. I love nothing would make me happier than to send them off. I'm also going to be in Vegas for the last 2 weeks of June. If anyone's going to be there, I can bring pins down and we can hand them off and save on some shipping. Or if we're doing a Rec Poker road trip, I'll always bring the pins there as well. So if we can get together either Running Aces or Playground or one of the fun places we go this year, I'd be happy to make that happen. Yeah, you'll be in my email backlog. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Luke. No, but of course, we're going to be sending that to info@rec.poker. And so there won't be an email backlog because everything's going to be magically better starting now. I'll just always start getting back to people immediately, I promise, because that's how things work, right? Speaking of Vegas, it's right around the corner. We're going to be doing our meetup game sometime between June 23rd and 28th. If people are going to be in Las Vegas for that part of the WSOP, I'd love to get together with as many members as we have in Vegas at the time, play some poker, maybe. Maybe we'll do like a karaoke night. Maybe we'll just go get a big meal somewhere. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen, but I know we're going to end up getting a poker game going at some point that we'll be doing. I love these YouTube chatters. We have so much fun here. We'll definitely be doing a meetup game, so I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, if you're listening live tonight, the deep dive recording seminar is going to be happening right after the show here in about 45 minutes. This is a great opportunity for folks to play in a simulated tournament environment. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on short stack, or not short stacks, but reshove stacks. Once stacks start getting a little shorter and we start getting to the point where someone opens in front of you, and instead of 3-betting to a smaller sizing, you end up just being at the point where it's time to shove. This is an area where I think a lot of recreational players are leaving some money on the table. This is an area where we could pick up some edges by studying a little bit. So if you're a premium member and you're listening live, there's still a few seats left in the deep dive session tonight, and I encourage you to sign up for that in the Rec Poker forums. Rob, you were saying we've got the Twitter poll out there, and it looks like Darrell Carney and Barry Carter's book, Simplified, or GTO Simplified, is kind of running away with it. Are the polls still open, or are we closing the door real soon?
Yeah, we have one more day. They'll close tomorrow. I'm also adding up any votes that come in through the book study group because some people are not Twitterites. They're not tweeting. No. They're not birds.
God bless them. You're probably wiser than us.
Yes, I don't do Facebook, but I do Twitter, so I don't know what the heck. Social media is just kind of a weird thing that people get into or they don't, right? So anyway, I put the poll on Twitter. It's very difficult to put a poll in the Rec Poker website. I don't know if it's the operating system or whatever it is. It's just very difficult to put a poll in there, so I use Twitter. But again, anybody who wants to vote, I put it also in the book study group. So if you want to vote, you can go to the book study group and see that and then respond to that message. And I will add those to whatever votes we have. But right now, GTO Simplified by Darrell Carney and Barry Carter is running away with it.
And I'm going to start a new poll on Twitter to see if we can change the name of anybody who participates to birds as Twitter birds, because I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, I like that too. Joe, while I've got you here, I know you just had your second session of your Poker PsyOps group, and so you've got another one coming up in June, June 15th, if I'm looking at the calendar correctly, because it's always on the third Thursday of the month. How's it been going so far, and what are you interested in getting into for the next session?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been going well. You have to ask the people that have been attending. I really want to encourage people to attend and bring questions. We present on, or I present on a specific topic each week, each month. But like last month, it was on cognitive biases, kind of an introduction to them and a listing of them. But I think it works best actually when people ask questions, because it gives a lot of good conversations, not only about the concept that we're talking about or the concept that they bring to it, but also people adding their own frustrations with or experience with the difficulty that somebody is experiencing or the phenomena that they've observed at the table. So I really encourage people, come listen to the presentation, but there's always time to talk about the things that you think about on a daily basis at the table regarding cognition or tilt or mindfulness or even other psychiatric difficulties that you may experience that may impact your play. And these are things that we can talk about during that time. And I think it's been pretty helpful for people. At least that's the feedback I've gotten.
Yeah, great. In fact, one of our new premium members, Carmine, when you become a premium member, I send out this email with a whole bunch of info about how to get the most out of your membership. And it includes a link to a one-on-one Zoom chat with me. So I was just chatting with Carmine earlier today, and he said specifically he wanted to tell Joe that he really enjoyed the first video in your series, and he's getting more into it. But that was one of the things that got him really interested in getting more involved in stuff here at Rec Poker. So I think people like it, Joe. You're doing great work over there, man.
I have one fan, Carmine. That's the only one so far. So as long as I can start building from there, I'll be all right. But thank you, Carmine.
It all starts with one. Kim, you've got some exciting travel plans coming up. I know normally we'd be doing your hand history review this week, but you're going to be down in Vegas, and I think you're going to be down in Vegas next month for June's hand history review as well. On what am I looking at here? The 27th. So it's going to be. This is the life when you're a modern, poker celebrity traveling all over the world, playing tournaments, having fun with Stewie and Elizabeth. It's hard to make room for all this stuff in a full, rich life.
I can try and reschedule for the little in between time I'm home, so I'll look at the calendar. I have some great hands from my past weekend. I went and played some tournaments at Turning Stone, so I wrote some hands down. So I really want to look at those. So if anybody else has any hands, they can put them in the group forum, and we'll look at them. And hopefully I'll have some more hands after playing live at the WSOP.
Kim is also going to change the name of her presentation to "I'll Pencil You In," as given the difficulties with the schedule.
No, it's amazing, Kim. You're going down to play in the Solve for Why Academy. Is that right?
To take the Solve for Why Academy, attend it. Yeah.
That's amazing,
it's a 4-day tournament prep course for the WSOP. So We'll
Solve for
see.
Wise been one of our learning partners for a long time. We love what they're doing over there. Some really sharp minds, and they really focus on. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, but they really focus on kind of like the exploitative aspect of poker, and it's all grounded in GTO, but it's really more about kind of taking advantage of the leaks that you see at the table. Is that fair to say?
Yes and no. I mean, their tournament academy is really focused on the different stages of a tournament and how you play according to the different stage of the tournament. So,
Cool.
yeah.
Nice. John, I think we've got the quarterly heads up tournament coming up on Saturday, June 17th. This is one of the ways that folks can win their way into Marek Madness. Is that right?
Yes, this is one of 3 that we will be holding this year. So this is your first chance to play in the Heads Up tournament. So if you want to play in Marek Madness and see if you can become a champion, this is your chance to enter.
It is pretty cool, this Marek Madness that Taylor Moss really runs every year in March, or Marek as we call it. It's a ladder tournament style, all heads up, winner take all, single elimination. And the way that you can enter is by winning one of these 3 quarterly heads up battles that we have. They're on the 3rd Saturday of June, September, and December. So circle that June 17th and see if you can get through a ladder of heads up rec poker players and win your way into Marek Madness. I hope that's going to be a lot of fun. Well, folks, I think I should tell folks head on over to the Running Aces website at runaces.com. You can check out the tournament schedule and see all the fun stuff they've got coming up. We're going to be doing a rec poker road trip out to the Running Aces in August or September this summer. The dates are still getting finalized, but it's going to be a great chance to get together and have some fun. So if you're not in Las Vegas for the last couple of weeks of June, maybe you can come join the fun at Running Aces sometime a little later in the summer. I think we're also going to try and do a road trip to Playground at one point over the next little while. And there's a couple other places that have reached out that I think could be fun to go visit if we can get a group together and make it happen. So I'm looking forward to that. Folks, this is the most fun I have every week. Thanks for joining us here on the Rec Poker Podcast. I want to thank in particular Rob, Kim, Joe, and John for being on the Wrecking Crew and for all they do to make Rec Poker great. All these fantastic folks in the YouTube chat, thank you so much for sharing your time with us tonight. I'm sorry that you missed out on the interview with Dave Lappin. Notice I'm not thanking David. I'm not thanking him yet. I don't know, like maybe this interview isn't going to be all that great. Will he even show up? Who knows? But I hope that goes really well. I got to thank the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, but mostly you, the listeners, because you're what we do it for here. So thanks for your support, and we'll see all the rest of you next week.